So it's been a busy week for the election campaigns. We've had Nigel Farage announcing his candidacy, Rishi Sunak accused of lying in the TV debate over his dubious Labour tax claims, and now even the D-Day commemorations have become an election issue. The Prime Minister has been criticised for leaving the 80th anniversary memorial early to return to the UK for a TV interview. Ben, what do you think? How important is this?
Well, it's the last major milestone event for D-Day commemoration. So this is probably the last time any of the veterans will still be alive. So that feels quite significant. I think that actually rests in the mind of a lot of people. Is it going to have cut through? Is it going to be like that bigoted woman from Gordon Brown? Is it going to be something quite defining? Well, first of all, we need to remember most people aren't paying attention. Well, people in terms of this general election. A lot of us are aware it's happening. A lot of us are very much have already made their minds up. But the enthusiasm for it is pretty low. The first debate between Starmer v Sunak, had viewing figures that were lower than Corbyn v Johnson, have lower than Clegg versus Cameron versus Brown. So pretty poor numbers already. I think amongst a sea of apathy, amongst a sea of, just lackluster feeling, something like this might annoy enough people or annoy the right people. And I think if you already had a low opinion of Sunak, it's going to go lower. I think for those who are having middling views of him, it's going to sour. It depends on how much cut through it has. I always make this point everywhere I go. The average Briton spends 5 minutes worth of attention on politics every single week. And that isn't, consumption of our wonderful articles. It's consumption of, memes on Facebook or the BBC's notification drawer on your phone. Okay, that's how much attention people spend. And I think for this to exist as like a headline for it's more than 24 hours now, and no doubt for it to feature in the debate to come on Friday, and for no doubt it to also feature over the weekend, suggests this will have cut through. But I think it's only going to, sow that Tory apathy further, isn't it?
Finn, what do you think of this? Do you think this is going to make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's quite as severe as, a Rishi Sunak Barnard Castle moment, but it was definitely a pretty bad mistake. And as our colleague George Eaton wrote, it's a lot worse than a gaffe. From a cynical electioneering point of view, he's fighting an election premised on national security and national service. So it seems leaving the D-Day commemoration seems completely at odds with what his messaging is. There's also the other really bad judgment there is he allowed Keir Starmer to kind of look like this serious statesman, while Rishi instead traded that opportunity to stand beside Zelensky to go and do an interview at ITV. So he kind of played right into Keir Starmer's hand. And then, of course, most importantly, and probably weighing most heavily on Sunak's mind at the moment, is reform. And he's just handed Nigel Farage perhaps the easiest attack line. So Nigel Farage must feel like Christmas early.
Yeah, Finn, you mentioned reform. We've got a question from Esther V359 who asks, why are Farage and Ties allowed to present reform as a political party when it is a private business? I think this is interesting. I think we mentioned this last week, so that's probably why we've got a question about it. I mean, we must say it is a political party. It's just also a private business. So most political parties are unincorporated associations, which essentially means that you have a membership, you have a committee that the membership elects, and they run the party, and that's why you got in the Labour Party the National Executive Committee. Whereas Reform is essentially owned by Nigel Farage, and that's why he was able to eject Richard Tice in this sort of free market brutality in a single day last week. So they are a political party, but they're also a private business. They're just slightly different. It means it's way less democratic. I think Nigel Farage is promised to democratize the party over time. So we'll see how that goes. What do you think, Vin?
Odd thing for Farage to say that he's going to democratize the party, given how he appeared to behave last week with as you said, the unceremonious booting of Richard Tice. And Richard Tice clearly is trying to own the narrative, saying it was it was all voluntary, but no one really knows. But they don't look like two men who are very happy bedfellows at the moment. But we'll see. I mean, Nigel Farage has been having a great campaign so far, it seems.
Ben, we've got another one here from YouTube user Joanne Chris Marchant, who asks, how will tactical voting and the addition of reform affect the Lib Dems?
So we are recording this on Friday the 7th of June, which is only a few short days after Nigel Farage announced his return that Finn is rightly already calling a successful campaign for him. It's only been a few short days. And we have already seen reforms numbers go up by, it depends which pollster you're looking at. It could be by about 5 points, 4 points, 3 points. And it's not, this is beyond margin of error stuff. This is increased enthusiasm from prospective reform voters. And one thing I need to just make clear to you, when you look at those opinion polls and you see the 5-point rise for reform and you see like a 2.4 for the Tories, 2.4 for Labour and so on and so forth, this isn't reform taking, former Tory voters, former Labour voters. This is actually reform bringing out people who until recently were swearing off voting altogether this election. So that's what we're seeing in the opinion polls now. It's something quite... always remember that, when you look at the headline voting intentions, it's an ever-changing pool of voters. People go in, people go out, people die, people come of age. I mean, that's a crude way of putting it, but you get what I mean. So this 5-point rise recently, 3 points, according to Britain Elects, has changed the arithmetic slightly. So I just put out the model update this morning, and I was looking at the numbers, and I thought, my God, they look silly. They were absolutely ridiculous, to be honest with you. And I shouldn't be abusing my model this early in the game, but these are numbers of if the election was held now. And if the election was held now, compared to last week, you have the Tories shedding another 30 seats, 10 of them going to the Lib Dems, 20 of them, 19 of them going to Labour, and 1 of them going to Reform. The addition of Reform basically drags that Tory share down a little bit, and enough seats hands it over to Labour, and more than enough seats as well hands it over to the Lib Dems. So how will tactical voting affect it? Now, of course, the addition of Reform drags the Tory share down, but what about tactical voting? So it's in 1997, around about 2 to 3 dozen seats changed hands as a consequence of tactical voting. If you don't account for tactical voting right now, if you say it doesn't exist, this election, it's not going to happen, then if an election was held now, you would have the Lib Dems coming away with 30 to 40 seats, and you'd have the Labour Party coming away with around about 400 seats, okay? Factor for tactical voting, and actually it's not just a few dozen seats that change hands, it's more like 4, 5, 6 dozen, okay? Because the scale of the Tory loss means so many more seats come up for competition, come up for grabs, basically. Now, tactical voting, what will it really do for the Lib Dems? Now, for the model, and Freddie's pulled me up on this in a previous recording, which is what my model shows, larger numbers for the Lib Dems than other models do. And that's entirely fair, but I just want to sort of explain it. So my model, unlike others, factors for local strength. If in council elections, like in Aylesbury and Buckinghamshire, you have a strong Lib Dem base in council elections, and there's no such thing for the Labour Party, you can probably assume that progressive voters between Labour and the Lib Dems will choose the Lib Dems. And so when I factor in, when I look at this seat, I say this seat is going to be Con v L Dem, and as such, a proportion of the Labour vote the proportion of the prospective Labour vote rather, will be moving to the Lib Dems. A little bit complicated. You can actually read the methodology if you want to, but I've done that in more than enough seats. This model is a lot more responsive to council elections, local elections, and so it identifies a hell of a lot more seats than perhaps even Lib Dem organisers accept that are prospective winnable for the Lib Dems. Now, I've had organisers get in touch to say this is bollocks, basically, excuse the language, but I've also had other organisers come in to say you're the only one noticing this. You're the only one noticing we're in with a chance here. So to be honest with you, right now the forecast, as a consequence of reform advances, as a consequence of reform dragging the Tories down, puts the Lib Dems on 50 to 70 seats. That's not unreasonable on these numbers.
That is remarkable. We've also got this debate tonight. So it's the 7-way debate. The parties can send representatives. It's not necessarily the leaders. Angela Rayner is going to be there. Penny Mordaunt, Nigel Farage. It's his big moment to go onto the national stage. How do you think it's going to go down, Finn? Will it matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think these TV debates don't matter as much as they might profess to. they have minimal cut through and much less cut through than the kind of like a presidential style American TV debate, which matters a lot more. I don't think we're having, a Kennedy versus sweaty Nixon 1960 moment over these. I mean, I think, what is interesting about these debates is less how much impact they have in the moment, but how the media frames who won and who lost in the aftermath. And that can kind of set the tone for the week and set the tone for the weekend. How the newspapers write about them, I think matters just as much as what people see exactly on the screen. But I think that, the debate will be interesting, will be lively. I mean, there's a lot of people. And if we thought that Starmer versus Sunak on Tuesday night was chaotic, I think we could be in for something quite dramatic. And then, of course, all eyes will be on Angela Rayner, I think, is the most interesting person to watch.
It's interesting. I think Andrew made the point on Tuesday that Angela Rayner will actually be able to shut down Nigel Farage's sort of populist streak, his anti-establishment spiel, which he'll do quite a good job of. But it's interesting. It's seven-way debate. I remember that big moment. I think it was back in 2015 where David Cameron went round the room and said higher taxes, higher taxes, higher taxes, higher taxes. That's the sort of moment that sort of meme, the short clips they'll be trying to get. Ben, what do you think? How do you foresee it?
Chaotic, absolutely disastrously chaotic. It could, we just talked about D-Day and Sunak's gap there. I think and Rayner could go quite hard on that, attacking the Conservatives. But then again, who are you up against? You're up against Penny Mordaunt, who has a history with the armed forces. So it's a bit of a hard ass there. And Penny Mordaunt is being identified as perhaps successor to Sunak, if of course she holds her Portsmouth North seat, which on current numbers she isn't. So a bit of a tough ask there. It's hard, as Finn says, the breakthrough, the people who watch debates are people who've often already made their minds up. Okay, undecided voters are undecided for a reason because they don't pay as much attention to politics as the media in Britain. Unfortunately, sorry, you're talking to the wrong people. We're thinking of the wrong people here. They are undecided because they don't often think of it. People who are undecided, people who are apathetic about the country, people who are, not that enthused about politics, have 9-to-5 jobs. They work their socks off. Again, they only consume 5 minutes worth of attention a week. Very rarely does a political issue break through to them. I think D-Day will and could, and it might actually shift some numbers there, but not by much. And so this 7-way debate in which it is Farage going on it. It's not Richard Tice. Farage has definitely Tice in every single way. It's like Georgy Malenkov being upended for Nikki Khrushchev. So I think he will try. I think he could be the standout by virtue of him being him. I think Angela Rayner is a lot more flexible than Keir Starmer, a lot more responsive, a lot more reactive, which I think works in her favor. But bear in mind, her own favorables, the public perception of her isn't great, okay? And it hasn't always been great. She actually has a mixed reception amongst voters. She could change that. But she has to be something that preconceived prejudices do not have, basically. Unfortunate or not, that is a struggle for her. I think really that this debate will feel like the also-rans debate, the also shows debate, in which Farage may emerge as the cleanest, most professional of them all. But who knows? I don't know if I'm going to watch it, to be honest with you.
Just looking at the list, you have got some of the much more bombastic, charismatic figures in Parliament. You've also got Stephen Flynn on there, who I think is one of the most fluent speakers in Parliament. He has his 2 questions, each PMQs, and he does use them very well. He'll be very conscious of the fact that he needs to attack Labour. He does that every single week through this sort of indirect question towards the Prime Minister, which is really directed towards Keir Starmer, but he's a great speaker. So you've also got on there Daisy Cooper from the Lib Dems, Carla Denyer, who's the co-leader of the Greens, who's standing in Bristol, and she could win that seat, as we discussed yesterday. And then you got Rinat Ulworth from Plaid Cymru, who's the leader there. And then let's get to a final question. You've got a question for yourself here, Ben, from Solveig. I would like to use this election campaign to get better at reading, analysis, and understanding polling focus groups, voter intentions and behavior. What is your best tips? What are your best tips, Ben, for reading, listening, and getting better at this?
You forgot to mention the end bit of the question.
Sorry, beside reading and listening to Ben Walker himself, of course.
Exactly. 4 years at the New Statesman. My ego knows no bounds. Thank you very much for having me. Right. Okay. You want to read the polls. You want to get better at it. You want to understand it. First of all, we got to stop sensationalizing polls. Okay. Rewind yourself 10 years ago to the Scottish independence referendum. One poll, 51% independence, 49% for the union. That was like, how was that promoted? How was that covered? How was that spoken about? It was just almost as if Yes had a lead. And they did on a spreadsheet, but polling is a science. It has an error margin. It has a margin for error. You know, when you did science in school, when you did science in primary school, how many times did you do a test? You didn't do it once, did you? You did it 3 times. Why? Because in one test, there is a margin for error. So when you look at polling, when you look at numbers and you see stuff like 51-49, don't think that's the definitive number. Don't think that's the number you're seeing on your computer screen, your television screen. You look at those numbers and you think, okay, it's around there. It's around there. It's a dead heat, actually. And I look at 51-49 and I see dead heat. I see it could be, 54-46 or the other way around. Yeah. Okay. We think back to the EU referendum, the final polls. You average out the final polls, it was also 51-49. But the academics, the number of academics pollsters who were, for their sins, but understandably going on the telly enough, mentioning those figures and not the margin around it, the error margin around it, had convinced so many people that Britain was going to vote Remain on the 23rd of June 2016. Didn't turn out like that. So when you see those numbers, absolutely just get your head out of the idea it's just those numbers, there's an error margin. Also, don't pay attention to one poll, pay attention to all of them. I have to promote myself. The reason I'm here is because I run something called Britain Elects, so by all means, please keep an eye on that. Other aggregators are available. Another thing you should absolutely do is, yes, I get this from friendship groups who are more political junkie based, and they always ask me, is this issue, is the way Starmer, slaughtered Sunak at PMQs, is it really going to change the numbers or something like that? And I'm like, no, again, we just said it earlier, the average Briton pays 5 minutes worth of attention to politics every week. The probability of that little hobby horse story of yours breaking through, hitting through, changing votes is virtually nil. And I've been writing this for the past year and a bit, since Liz Truss had her bender in Downing Street and Rishi Sunak popped on in to change things up. Will Sunak and Northern Ireland change the polls? Will the budget change the polls? Will going hard on boats last year change the polls? And they never did, because you have to look at what are the issues that matter most to voters. Okay. And for the past year and a bit, the writing has been on the wall. It has been the cost of living and nothing else. Sunak making noises about trans people, Sunak making noises about anything other than the economy and the cost of living were wasted words, wasted noises. And as a consequence, we are in the situation we are in now. So, my God, pay attention to error margins. Okay. Follow poll aggregators. Don't stick to just one pollster. And always remember what voters care about is not the same as what the media and what the politicians and what the activists care about. It can be very, very different.